planting and
I don't know, we'll see. I haven't recorded it yet. I'm just gonna record it, start recording it, get it done, and then mute it. Good. Okay, got it. So,
And then you just do that land that you're having.
No, I have a rule.
will you come sit over here and talk, please? What? You gotta be louder.
Hello.
So it's picking up. Hello? Okay, so it's picking me up. Hello? 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 Oh, good delay. What about over here when I'm standing here? Is it doing anything? Yeah, yeah. So this is where people are gonna come up and then make every attempt not to trip on all these riders. So I think that is,
I've been on and off.
Got a place, where they accepted her annual nursing home card. Fortunately for us, the keeping her in the rehab status. Medicare she has fallen, she got upstairs. Partially because she forgets that she's weak and needs help. And partially because keeping her foot on her leg. At least on the one occasion. Oh, no. Where she was found on the ground with her legs above. Yeah, it's never. Bedside table at home, she was trying to get the table support. It fell, she fell. But she hasn't hurt, she hasn't broken anything again. Yeah, that's actually the frightening part because there's something about Medicare where, in terms of rehab, they will cover an injury for something like, after the injury. But then you have to have a certain period of time before
I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight to the selectmen's meeting. That is 6:04. We're starting the meeting. And so we're going to call this meeting to order. And the first item on the agenda is a public hearing for special amusements and victuals licenses for Two Birds Cafe, LLC. Is there anyone from Two Birds LLC here to discuss this? In case we have questions. Okay, I don't see anybody flying by. I just see a mallard go by beaches. But I don't see. Okay, Mika, what, do you have all the necessary paperwork?
So Two Birds Cafe is Chip and Jen Person. And as you'll notice, it doesn't have a fire inspection by Ralph yet because they don't have everything that gets them to the point where they need that, but they still wanted to have the special amusement and victualers. So then that way they were as much in par with the rest of them as they could. And so when, if that gets them to that point where they're obligated to have the inspection, they will get that, but they just kind of wanted to be a step ahead of the process and not.
So would the suggestion be that we accept it on condition of all of the inspections being?
Yes, yeah, because they don't have things that you need for the inspection.
All right, so they're not actually, so they're, that's something that needs to happen. The other question that I had, and I can't find that now, so there's so many pieces. Oh, here it is. My question has to do with the special amusement, when it says what type of entertainment gathering, does that mean music? Does it mean, I mean, is it just gatherings?
So
People
the
just
reason
getting
that they
together?
chose to proceed with getting a special amusement application was in case if ever in the future, somebody wanted to rent out their space to have a bridal shower or, you know, some of the similar events that like the Niblick would take place upstairs. They don't have anything lined up, but Chip said that they would rather have it and be covered than not.
So do they plan to have music?
They, from my understanding and talking to them, they're not planning to have those things, but in the future, if they plan to have more of things like, you know, they're very limited to the space that they can have people in. And so it would be very small crowds and it would be more, from my understanding of, like I said, a bridal shower or, you know, a surprise little birthday party or something like that, not events like at the Slow Bell.
I guess that was my only thing is because we regulated the hours for the Slow Bell. And are they going to be applying for an alcohol license or no? All right. So let's open up to the board. Anybody have any questions? No? Anybody else? No? Anyone from the public have a question about the Two Birds Cafe? What is it? Two Birds Cafe. Seeing none, do we have a motion to accept conditional upon inspections, this victuals license and the special amusement permit? Okay, so it's been moved by Jen, seconded by Bo. Any discussion?
So you've closed the public hearing, obviously.
Yeah, I asked. Oh, yeah, that's right.
That was an agenda item later on.
Oh, that's an agenda item later on, okay. All right, nobody had anything to say. All right, so we'll look at it. Thank you. Because everybody does these things differently. In my old life, we used to have the public
Yeah, no,
hearing
I
and
didn't
then
wanna
vote
get-
on it.
I didn't want to get technical. I just-
Yeah. No, the way it's advertised, that's right. Okay, so the next thing is to have a public hearing on the petition referendum question. And so, just to start this, because I think this is probably what a lot of people are here today. Before I open the public hearing, I have a few comments and ground rules. We are here to just, I'm gonna speak loudly so that the owl can hear me, and I've also got a mask on, so if I'm yelling, it's not because I'm yelling at you, I'm just trying to project. We are here to discuss a citizen's petition to have a referendum at the polls on June 14th to determine if the town should make repairs to Indian Island Road based on a study conducted by engineer Bonnie Baker and presented to the Board of Selectmen at their April 6, 2022 meeting. The background of the issue and the town's interest in the road is as follows. In the 1850s, the town of Cumberland laid out the north and south roads. The north road began at the shore adjacent to the Little Chebeague Bar, or as described in the road description, near the shore on the property of Henry Mansfield, who lived where Susie Stavropoulos now lives. Ellis Ames Ballard bought the Mansfield farm in 1901, and shortly thereafter rerouted the road that had run down Susie's driveway and around her house. But there is no record of a new description or an agreement with the town, but everyone used the new road. In the 1990s, the town of Cumberland received a coastal access grant, and through that research, the discovery. At that time, the Indian Island Company was working with the Land Trust to preserve open space at the hook. The town and the company entered into an agreement in which Indian Island would provide five parking spaces and shore access if the town maintained the road and kept it passable. The agreement was finalized and registered. When the road and adjacent shore washed out during the Patriot State storm, in keeping with the agreement, the town with FEMA funds paid for the repairs. In 2018, the president of Indian Island contacted the town of Chebeague and in writing put the town on notice that work needed to be done to stabilize the road near the shore. The next year, Mike Dyer also brought the condition of the road to the town's attention. And then COVID hit, as did several significant storms causing more damage from ocean action and upland runoff. At the 2021 town meeting, money was approved to work on the road. At that point, it was determined that although the voters had approved spending the money, actually expending, then actually using the money, was at the discretion of the Board of Selectmen. An engineering study and associated plans were presented to the Board of Selectmen on April 6, 2022. This referendum question would require the Board of Selectmen to use $60,000 that has already been approved and to accept a matching grant of $60,000 from the Raymond Family Foundation to pay for the emergency repairs. Because the money was already allocated in 2022, there is no tax implication in this current budget. The petition, current budget meeting, the one we're going to be sending to town meeting in June. The petition referendum question reads as follows. Shall the town vote to require the Board of Selectmen to expend $60,000 from the capital improvements 9195 Indian Point retaining wall account, of which $65,000 was approved and added to the previous balance of $5,308 at the June 12, 2021 town meeting for the repairs to the Indian Island Seawall. Expenditures are subject to a matching grant in the amount of $60,000, and when received, selectmen are required to accept and expend, which is necessary to keep the Indian Island Road passable. Said repairs are described by G.E.I Consultants at the Selectmen's meeting April 6, 2022. Work on the retaining wall will be done in 2022. That's how it reads. This is the public's opportunity to weigh in on that issue. Because it is a referendum at the polls, this issue will not be discussed at town meeting. This afternoon, Baker received the final engineering report. It will be posted on the town's website, so you'll have the next 13 days to study it before the vote. We want everyone to have an opportunity to speak. If you would like to comment, please stand in front of the owl and over by that chair so that your thoughts can be heard. Any questions and comments should be addressed to the chair and not directly to anyone else in the hall. If you need a clarification from someone, ask me and I will ask that person if they want to respond. Please be respectful of each other and do not return to speak until everyone has had an opportunity to speak. Before I open the public hearing up to the public, I have been requested by Beverly Johnson, who circulated the petition, to read a statement. She is sorry that she cannot be here in person, but she is in Portugal. Beverly Johnson, to those gathered for the public hearing. I've been a frequent visitor to the Hook for decades. It is a unique access to Little Chebeague and a place where islanders can clam, birdwatch, picnic, play in the sand and swim. While I currently walk up and down the hill from the Hook to North Road, it would have been difficult before I had my hip replaced. I was glad that I could drive my car to reach an area that allowed me to access the shore. When I voted at last year's town meeting to fund repairs to ensure access, I thought the town had made a decision. I did not know that the Board of Selectmen had the final say and that spending the money was at their discretion. I thought a vote of 42 to 12 meant the repair would happen. During the past year, the erosion was continued from upland runoff and ocean action. I spoke with many people who feel that we need to do what we can to slow erosion while we develop a more permanent fix. In the meantime, the Raymond Family Foundation volunteered to match $60,000. So I decided to circulate a petition to let people of Chebeague decide if they wanted to use the money approved at the 2021 town meeting and the Raymond funds to make essential repairs. While no one can guarantee what will happen in the future, we do know that if we do nothing, the road will be gone and people who can't walk up the hill from the sandbar will never be able to access the sandbar in Chebeague again. The town of Chebeague will have reneged on an agreement with the Indian Island Corporation to maintain the road. Carrying a hod of clams up the hill to North Road is tough for an aging community. Please think about your neighbor's needs when you vote. So that was Lord Beverly Johnson's thoughts. Now it's your turn. Please come to the designated area if you'd like to speak. If others are in line, please keep a distance of 6 feet between you. We're trying to be respectful of people's, because of COVID. Please identify yourself for the tape recording. Please keep your remarks as brief and to the point as possible. And thank you all for participating tonight. We really appreciate everyone coming out. So, whoever would like to be the first person to speak can go over and stand by that chair. And
Are you gonna ask the board to comment first, or?
no, I was just a public hearing.
So I can do it that way?
Yeah.
All right, I'll do that.
Okay. I mean, you could wait until the end and then we'll do it,
This is good.
Anything else? No.
Bloody hell.
but is that okay where she's still?
Too close.
You can probably
Stand
stand
chair.
on that chair. There we go. I just talked loud.
You know how that works for me. Thank you all for coming. I jotted down some notes of how I remember the meeting on the 6th went and why some of us decided that this wasn't the best way to go. On the 6th, Barney Baker provided a presentation only. And to be clear, the board repeatedly asked for updates throughout the fall and winter. We were told the engineers had been meeting with representatives of Indian Island Company, but there was nothing new to be provided to the town. We were not provided with a formal report, and I wrote, we still have not received one. Well, just this instant, we got a report at the start of this meeting, which I haven't had a chance to really look at or review. What we were given was an Indian Point resiliency study. It was basically 9 pages of very fancy graphs, and Barney went from that. To be very frank, I found Barney's presentation full of inaccuracies. He repeatedly couldn't correctly show where the parking was, for instance. He talked about plantings, some where he showed that they were below high water mark, which didn't make a lot of sense to me. When asked about access to the beach, he suggested that maybe an 80-foot ramp could be installed. And all I could think about was, well, how do we remove that 80-foot ramp in the winter? And who's going to remove that 80-foot ramp? And there were a lot of questions with his plan or his report. He talked about maybe aquaculture. There was a lot of maybes. Maybe aquaculture could provide a wave barrier that would help sustain it. And he did confirm that at that time, there were no federal or state grants available. After about 40 minutes of discussion, our chair asked for a motion. None of us felt that it was in the best interest of the town to make that motion to support Barney's plan. I don't think any of us were sitting here thinking that nothing should be done. This was just not a plan that seemed like it was in the town's best interest. So Donna chose to table it, and here we are. I'm disappointed. This is how things have ended up. Instead of having this on an agenda to have a workshop with Indian Island Company to discuss alternative plans or actions, we find ourselves with a petition referendum questioning, which is forcing this board to act on something that we felt wasn't in the best interest of the town. The first time I heard of this petition referendum was last Friday. And even though our chair knew about this on May 2nd, if not well before. So, thank you.
I can respond. It was not my place to tell people about this. It was the town staff, and I think they can clarify that.
Can I get in line?
Sure.
I have one simple question. Why are we tied to Barney Baker's plan? And can we find another engineer to facilitate that plan? That's all I'm gonna say.
Thank you, Teddy.
My name is Bob Ernest of Rose Point Road. I was at the meeting on April 6th when Mr. Baker spoke and made his presentation. I've also been watching the point closely at virtually every storm for the last 3 winters. Made extensive video recordings of what was going on down there. Shared it with the land trust, shared it with the select board for 3 years. And a few observations. One, I just want to start off by saying I'm really frustrated with this issue being dealt with in a secret ballot referendum with a hearing with a good number of people here, but it being restricted from town meeting. This is, if ever there was an item that should be discussed at town meeting, this is it. This shouldn't be being done here. I just want to get that out front. It's just not the way we as a town work together. There are a lot of stories going around that you'll never be able to go to the hook again, and that's just not right. There are alternative ways to access the hook that have been mentioned by people from Indian Island, by people from the land trust, by people to the select board. We've not, as far as I know, done anything to explore those options, but there are other options that involve accessing the bar over a hard ledge that gradually slopes down into the low tide intertidal area. It would be safer than walking over a dune. It would not require removing a ramp for every storm. And you could actually install a handrail quite easily by drilling holes into the ledge, installing pipe, and installing a handrail. It would be a more accessible access point to the bar for walking and climbing. Yeah, my point is just it can be improved. At the proposal on April 6th, the question was asked of Mr. Baker, what if we had storms like we had last winter? And he said, well, what I'm proposing might last a year, maybe 2. That was his answer. The question was asked of the engineer, well, what's the next step? What's the step above this? What's the cost of that next step? And that's when he talked about things like aquaculture, which I'm practice aquaculture. I'm a student of aquaculture. Aquaculture is not a solution to this issue. Aquaculture cannot be practiced in the intertidal in the wintertime. And that's where the solution needs to be. His answer to what would it cost was we estimate at least $1 million, not 1 to 5 million, not 1 to 2 million. We estimate at least $1 million. And he also referred to the fact that permitting would be challenging, which if you do research on that area, it is technically classified a coastal barrier resource system. The The federal government does not want development to happen in those systems for very good reason. They're meant to be living systems. We could build a causeway there, like the causeway between Cousins and Little Jones. I don't think that's the right solution. In our comprehensive plan, we speak extensively as a community. We adopted the comprehensive plan about the importance of open space and maintaining natural space in this town. And I think that's a great place to start. There are grants out there for restoring sand dune systems. I've been approached by the land trust to see if there's interest in such projects on the island. And I, for one, would like to see going forward in that direction, as opposed to further armoring that might last a year or two, and then replacing that later with something that costs more than $1 million. When we as a town have other things we need to spend money on, like the stone pier, and when I, for one, don't want to see taxes being raised for one project after another. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Bob. Who is next?
I have a question,
Can you go up?
just a question for Bob.
Yeah, but can you go up the account?
I'm sorry, I'm Cap Leonard. I'm impressed with what you had to say, Bob. Is your work and particularly the observations you've made over the years available to this group, or would you make them available for study? Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Okay, who's next?
I'm Michael Porter. Unlike everybody else, I don't have a paper to read from. Sorry about that. So only half prepared. There's a lot of talk about how if we fix that road the way it was suggested, but shoring it up again, it wouldn't last, it might not last, or might last a winter or two or whatever. But you know, in the long run, we're all dead. There are a lot of things we do that don't last. We pave roads, they get potholes, the frost has that. And we pave them again. Every spring, we go over all our dirt roads and fill in the places where they've washed out partly and rutted and plows have chewed them up, and thawing and freezing has made problems with them. We dredge a stone wharf every 10 years. Because nature never meant that it'd be a wharf accessible low tide, but the stone wharf is. It's just not a natural place for a wharf. It's just where it happens to be. Historical reasons. So we dredge it every 10 years. It's our life as people is, in a sense, an imposition on nature. That's what we do. We exist here principally by changing nature around. And that's what's being talked about here. If we want to keep that road with the advantages it gives, then we have to fix it and probably fix it again. Thank you.
Amy? Here's your chance to get on.
I love Steve. Amy Rich, I actually just have a clarification because I've just been listening. We have 60,000, there was 5,000 left over, another 60,000 grant. Did I understand from the engineer that this actual project would be somewhere near $1 million?
No, it's 120,000 for this project.
Just what
And
he
then-
has
Then there's
proposed?
another section, which is Indian Island, which they're doing, which is unrelated to this, which is another 60,000.
Is there an estimate of like, okay, all right, so what he is proposing with this ramp would be all covered for 125,000?
120.
120, okay.
And the ramp was something they discussed at the time. There's gotta be some kind of a ramp to get to the shore, or they have to change where the access is.
Yeah.
So there's a range of where it could go.
And this ramp would be,
That's
you'd
all,
have to take it out if they go with that each storm.
well, no, it would depend on what the storm was gonna be.
Okay,
I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is just my
okay.
thought. I mean, if you knew you were gonna get a hurricane, we do something different than we would do. And seasonally, we take out the floats at the wharf.
Mhm.
You know, I don't really know. I don't think that we really, anybody would really know, no.
We didn't really discuss that.
Yeah, we just kind of got into, you know, that's just part of, when you start to develop a project, how it goes. But I would think that logically, it would be taken out, anything you put in would be taken out for the winter. And just like the floats are, and if you were gonna have a storm, you would take something out if it was gonna be a hurricane or a really bad storm.
Okay, got it.
Anything you wanna do to protect your infrastructure. But
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
well, I'm just shooting from the hip here. Ralph?
Ralph and Ralph, I have a question about the place of the ramp. We're talking about an 80-foot ramp over the sand.
No, that was just something that people talked about at that meeting, and he talked about it. There was no decision was about how long a ramp would be. It just came up.
Well, if he's proposing to spend $120,000 on us, or we are, I'd kind of like to know that. That's kind of a big deal, because talking about an 80-foot ramp over an elevation of like a foot.
No, I think that people are focusing on the 80-foot ramp.
Well, no, that's just one thing here. I
Yeah,
just
but what
think,
I mean is, I hope that people will read the report that we got tonight.
well, just in listening to Jen, it sounds like he has no real plan at all. It's just kind of shooting from the hip. And the board, with the exclusion of you, said that they didn't like that. And I kind of would like to back them up on that. I don't, you know, Michael was talking about, you know, we got to spend this money, $120,000 last year or two. I hope we're not spending $120,000 on the Roy Hill Road every 2 years. I don't think it's reasonable to spend $120,000 down there. It's only gonna last a year or maybe two, possibly. There's just a lot of money, Donna, to spend when we're grasping at straws to try to make everything else work there. That's all. And I agree with a lot of the other comments. I'm pretty disgusted with it. And I hope we can find a better spot to spend the money and a better plan to come up with to make this all work. Because I'd like to see it work, but this is no plan.
Well, I hope that people read the report that we got tonight and look at, there is a plan and there's diagrams that go with it. I have not had time to look at that, so I can't answer those questions. Okay, who would like to speak next? Herb?
Herb Bank, 50 North Road. I do want to correct you on one point. At the beginning, you said there would be no tax impact this year. But when Barney did his presentation on the 6th, he had he said this project is comprised of 4 things. 2 of those things were on the town. 2 of the 4 things. One of them was to fix the road, and the other one was to address the drainage. I don't know what the scope of either of those things is, or the cost, but presumably they would be part of this project and in this budget. Is that true?
Yeah, and I think that the way that we looked at that is that's part of regular maintenance, so it would be part of what they should be doing every year anyway.
Is that the case? I mean, is that what Barney said? Is that this is
Yeah.
just like regular maintenance? Okay, thank you. A lot of the points I had been covered, and I do want to underscore them. I think that what changed between the time of town meeting and today is Barney's presentation, and it didn't convince our selectmen who have been paying very close attention to this. It didn't convince me. I was participating by Zoom on that meeting, and I encourage everybody to go look at that presentation. It's not that easy to find, but it's out on YouTube. And look at those, look at what he says and see if it's a convincing argument to you for those who haven't seen that presentation. One of the things that he says in that is that, well, if we don't do this, then we'll have to adapt. And I think for me, for a situation like that, I think adaptation to natural forces like that is a whole lot smarter than trying to fight them and overpower them, which is what we're talking about here. And we're not talking with nearly enough guns to overpower Mother Nature. Now, Michael talks about maintenance, that's what we do. We screw up Mother Nature all the time. But the things that he cited don't have a designation, a special designation in the state. And you probably hear more about this if you don't know about it. But that beach has a special designation in the state, which is why they can't find state or federal funding for it. It's very hard to get, and there are agencies that will fight that because it's been designated as a special, beautiful, undeveloped space. What we're talking about doing is developing it to recreate something that was there before. It's not, Mother Nature's plan isn't to have it there. So I think we should really think long and hard about, do we want to try to overpower this or do we want to try to adapt? And people have already talked about adapting, and it may be changing the access. Doesn't mean losing the access. It's adapting. I think Jen mentioned it. There are very few alternatives looked at in going into this. And that's a troubling thing. I think we really do need to look at multiple alternatives and think them through very carefully before we do anything down there. And yeah, and I agree with Ralph that this project is viewed as a repair, was described as a repair, and a repair that will last some number of years. And we don't know how many, but it's a repair. And do we want to look at that repair every year? Is that what the plan is? Is to just budget $120,000 every 5 years or every whatever? So we need a little bit longer vision about what the right thing to do down there is, and come up with a thoughtful plan on how to approach it. And I'm not sure this was done that way. This was like a very tunnel vision approach, and without a lot of side views. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that is there a link to that presentation, Vika, on the website?
Today, if you go to our homepage where the news and announcements in, there's a section that says the June 1st public hearing. If you click on that, both of the presentations are on there. And tomorrow I can add the YouTube link from the presentation that he presented on it for anybody that wants to go back and listen to that.
And that will also include this report that we got tonight.
I put them on the website already. I did it today.
So I hope that people read those carefully. Thank you. Okay, who's next? Yeah.
I'm not prepared either. Susan White Reese. My biggest concern is that we're being asked to vote on something that nobody really knew much about. And when I read the, whatever it's called, referendum, whatever that is, yeah. It gives the impression that, yeah, if we don't vote on this, we're done. We're never talking about it again, and we've lost everything. I'm not hearing that tonight. I'm hearing that there are things being considered, things to discuss. People want to see this somehow maintained, fixed, whatever the right word is. But the feeling when you look at that article that people are going to vote on, and many people that aren't sitting here tonight or listening tonight, they're going to vote with this idea, there's an emergency that if you don't vote yes on this now, you're done. And I think that's just not the right way to be approaching this. I don't know if there's a way we can more effectively communicate, whether it's on the website or someplace, to explain exactly what this means, and that it was not the board's intent to say this was the only opportunity to ever do anything about this, or what a no vote could mean. People need to understand that, because otherwise they're going to be voting, strictly on emotion and not on the longer term success of keeping this as an accessible item for everybody.
Thank you, Judy. Okay, who's next? Richard?
Richard Hackle live on Banks Road. I just would like to first point out that, from what I understand, that this isn't a $120,000 project. We get it at half price, $60,000. And so it's a bargain at the price, but maybe it's still not a bargain if we don't like the plan. I feel like we need to do something here. Something needs to be done to the road, otherwise we just give it up. And I feel this is something to move forward. If we don't like parts of the plan, maybe we can attenuate it, but I think it's important. And another thing is I'm a dues paying member of the Indian Island Corporation. I'm not on the board, thank God, but I don't even know where they stand on this. But if the town refuses to take care of the road, what is the Indian Island Corporation going to say about their property and it becomes inaccessible? Maybe they'll stop paying their taxes, I don't know. But then there's an expense there. You lose a valuable piece of property that's bringing in some tax revenue. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, who's next?
Just kidding.
Carol?
Carol White, 250 North Road, and I just don't want to repeat what other people have said, but a couple of things that might be worth clarifying is the coastal barrier resource system classification is a designation for dynamic sand beaches. It's a very specific classification. There's not that many in the state of Maine. And they're classified because they tend to move in response to conditions of waves, wind, storms. And so consequently, they've been designated that way to prevent development on the beaches. And that is why no federal or state funds can be used for development or engineering improvement purposes. Not to say that federal or state monies couldn't be used for adaptation purposes or restoration purposes, but not for the type of plan that's being proposed here. So it's a very special designation that is restricted because of the nature of the system. That's why it's called a system and not a beach. It's the entire system. And the way these systems work is you do one thing, it causes a consequence in another area. And so by putting in some of these structures, we have, caused the beach sand to erode in front of those structures, sort of generating more of a problem. It's very difficult to, frankly, develop an engineered system that can effectively stabilize a beach in this kind of environment. So the science of, beach management has changed a lot in the past few years, and the current thinking is using things called, nature-based solutions or living shorelines. And Maine is just starting to implement some of those along with the Nature Conservancy and other partners. And that, to me, is the appropriate approach to this kind of a system. It's not a rocky headland like we have along many areas of Chebeague that is very stable, might still erode, the surface soils may erode, but it's a stable system. This is not. It's not going to be, even if we introduce some engineered structures over there. And when I say engineered, I mean even like the geotextile that Barney mentioned in his talk. So that's and Julia is in graduate school studying marine coastal geology. She used Indian Island as a case study because it's such a perfect example of exactly that. It's kind of a system where, trying to maintain it in its current condition is not, in my mind, feasible or practical. So I do think we need to adapt. I think we should maintain access to that beach. I'm not sure the access, pretty sure the access that we've had for years is not really feasible to maintain effectively, in terms of not having to constantly replace it, but also cost effectively. So I really do think, and I think it's we are responsible, we should be responsible to the next group coming along, whether it's the next generation or even just the next 10 years from now. We're basically deferring that to that group. We're deferring the adaptation. If we choose this plan, we're saying, well, we're just gonna put this in because we want to be able to get there for us. But what about the next crew that comes along? Then what? It's their problem to solve. So I think sooner or later, this is the beginning of, thinking about how we're gonna adapt to climate change as a community. We did a sea level rise study back in 2016 or 17, I don't remember the date. That area was identified as a vulnerable area. It's one of the few on the island. We're fortunate compared to other communities. So in my mind, we've known this for a long time. I did come to the selectmen in 2021, March of 2021, talking about exactly this long before Barney's plan was hatched, saying that, I really think we should look at adaptation. So it's not like we haven't suggested it from time to time. So I think this is the 4th or 5th meeting that I've attended specifically on the Indian Island issue. I think the whole community wants to maintain access to Indian Island. I really don't think there's anybody in the community that doesn't want to maintain access. I think it's a question of what's the appropriate approach. And I don't think this solution is reasonable for the long term. And I don't think it's fair that we defer that kind of a decision to the next group coming along, whether it's, the 40-somethings on the island that are gonna have to pay it down the line. I think now is the time we should stop and adapt. The other thing is I do have a problem that here we are at the public hearing, but we haven't had an opportunity to look at the plans that we're basically discussing. So I went to the meeting on April 6th. That was a long time ago. And the fact that we are having a public hearing without the opportunity to review the information ahead of time, to me, is not acceptable. And so I am disturbed by that. This has been an emotional issue in the community. I think sometimes it's been misconstrued in terms of, if we don't do this, we'll never be able to go down there. I don't think that's really true. So I don't really understand how this referendum process works, because I do think, like Sue said, it's sort of an absolute decision. It's being presented as you do this or, it doesn't give us any alternatives. And we did talk about those at the selectmen's meeting on April 6th. And I think, I can't speak for the selectmen, but I suspect some of them may be considered, maybe there's another approach. And instead of pursuing that kind of a discussion, we have a referendum. And so I really don't think that's a good way to try to solve these kinds of issues. And so that's, my personal perspective on it. But I really do think that there could be a more creative solution that could, in the long run, be less expensive, be more natural for the system, and more. That's a beautiful sand beach that's under a conservation easement. The Indian Island Corporation has been very generous in allowing public access to that location, and I think we could all work together to find, a much more appropriate long-term solution rather than spending, And I guess I heard you say it's. To me, it's still costing $120,000, even though there's a grant involved. Then I understood that the other half of the beach was another $120,000, but maybe I misunderstood at the public hearing. So the whole cost of the project is $180,000.
Well,
The whole cost of the engineering solution for the project, I'm not saying for the town, I'm just saying the engineered plan. I understand from what Barney said, he presented it sort of as a solution to the problem. And so anyway, that's I really think we should reconsider, and we should consider other options, and we should start thinking about how we're going to adapt to climate change instead of trying to fight climate change. Because it is really the impact of storms, but it's also we've had a rise in sea level over the past several decades, and why those storms are having a more severe impact is because sea level has risen. It's going to continue to rise. And so sooner or later, you won't be able to, have a parking lot. It's not if, it's when. So.
Thank you. We don't have a copy of exactly what Indian Island is going to do with their 60. I'm not sure the people here from Indian Island, but whether it's for the road, whether it's for, you know, down at the end of the point, I'm not sure what part of that project, you know, what exactly that is. Ernie,
Not really public speaker, but I'd probably spend as much time down there as anybody in this room on my hands and knees digging clams. And I'd like to remind everybody that that's one of only 2 places left on the island that we've surveyed where you can actually go dig a hog clams. So it's an important resource to me. I hold a license to dig. And one of the things that I think is really an interesting thing that I don't think a lot of people know about the Indian Island and the fire itself. During the war, the government put those boats and cement barges between Crow Island and Long Island. And then from Crow Island to Deer Point, there was a submarine service. But when they put those barges in there, what they did was they really helped Sam's wooden pilings that they drove in there to hold the road. They really helped a lot, because when the wind was strong to the east and northeast, it would come up into the cove with Long Island, come out through between Long Island and Crow Island, and baffle over to the hook and butt and wash that away. When they put those barges in there to keep submarines from coming through, when they put those barges in there, that acted like a buffer, and that stopped that wave action from coming over there onto the bar. And Carol was right, the bar does move. It moves, the sand moves back and forth there all the time. The only place it doesn't move is the very top of it. Strange, I don't know why. But I think that we should also, as a town, when we decide on this, we should be really careful what the engineers say. I was involved with the Stone Pier project when they put that wave break in there. And the engineers, I was sitting right alongside of them at one of the final meetings that they had there. And I asked him, I said, well, do you guys, you engineers, do you test these out in a wave tank? And he said, no. And I said, well, could you build a scale model and take it down to the beach and test it out down there? And he said, well, never thought of that. Anyway, he told us the wave break would work up there. And when Sam Ballard went to the guy that designed the wave break down at the University of New Hampshire, he asked Sam, he said, did the slats go all the way to bottom? And he said, no. He said, they're within a foot or two of the bottom. And he said, oh my God, he said, you don't have a wave break, you have a wave amplifier. So what I'm getting at here is, be careful what these engineers tell people, because I don't think they know any more than what we know from historically having been around here. So I'm around the bar for 60, 70 years and seeing what happens down there. And I think that it's probably wise, it's always wise to wait, and when you're going to make an important decision, it's always wise to wait and see if you come up with a real good plan. But I think that a lot of people, engineers included, I bet they didn't have a clue that the reason that wooden riprap, that they pilings that they drove in there, the reason that held all those years was because the government put those barges over there and stopped that wave action from coming in across the bar. And I've seen during hurricanes, heavy hurricanes down there, I've seen sand enough yards away on the northwest side of the bar. The sand actually would come out and go over the top of the mud
enough so that you could differentiate it with sensitivity on the sound machine. So that place is in flux all the time, it moves back and forth all the time. So the idea that I have is that, like Carol said, that it might be wise to wait and try to come up with some kind of a better plan. It's gonna cost a lot of money. But also keep in mind the shore access in a lot of communities all up and down the coast, they don't have it. We've got a lot of shore access. And with the laws being changed in the Supreme Court here in the state, that allows the ownership of the shore to the upland landowners. Now, you have even less access to the shore. So every single one of these places, access places to the flats, if you want to go dig enough flats, is important. And the town shellfish committee, we do a survey every year, and like I say, there's only two places that we found enough clams to where you can go easily and dig enough clams to eat. Anyway, that's
Thank you.
my thoughts on it.
Erica.
Your heart grows off, so heard a lot of good points here. I think what I'm hearing is that in general, we agree that maintaining access down to the hook, one way or another, whatever the plan is something that is widely shared. And I certainly hope that's true. The town is formally committed to maintain access. I know maybe that was specifically about maintaining the road as it is, but at least in principle, it seems that we have a pre-existing agreement by the town to maintain access. So that's a good thing. I think we all know the level of use that area gets and enjoyment that gets. One thing I hadn't heard mentioned, I thought Ralph was going to say it, is that for the rescue, maintaining access down there is really important. We get a lot of visitors, not just island folks, but we get a lot of people coming over on boats. I've been on multiple rescues down there. We have to have a way to get the rescue down there. We've had near drownings, we've had shortness of breath, we've had issues. And so whatever the plan is, whatever it looks like, more along the line of what Carol was talking about, whatever that is, I think it's important to remember that access is really critical, and people are going to be down there no matter what. And so we need to be able to get there. I feel like a little bit, and I'm sure other people have been a little bit of victim of some misinformation or misconstruing. I think that was suggested earlier. And what I'm hearing is that the board is not opposed to maintaining access or doing something, even spending these funds in some way that seems reasonable and effective to maintain that. So my thoughts is it would be helpful to the community for the board to basically overtly state that they're committed to maintaining access. And we as a town are maintaining access to the hook for purposes of safety, for purposes of enjoyment, and that we're committed to looking at methods and ways and spending available funds that are perhaps set aside, but not ready to be spent until we have a good plan. And in that way, the community knows you guys are on board and we're all on the same page. And we're looking at what those, looking at the various alternatives of what the plans may. We may wind up having a turnaround much shorter and further away from the hook and not going out on that road. That may all wind up being a sandbar. I don't know. But I sort of grieves me now feeling like I kind of got misled by some of the things that were being said. And, like the board was totally not willing to try to, use funds to do a good thing. And so I think it would be helpful for the board to clarify, come up with a position statement and put that out to the community and sort of highlight some of the details and points that we've talked about. And then to, essentially, I don't know if you set a separate committee or whatever, I'm not saying I don't know how long it would take, but a committee that's going to look at this and try to come up with plans with people like Carol and others, and get that information out there before this referendum, goes to the public. It's my thoughts.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Paul?
Paul Valeska, Sawyer Road. I'm concerned that this town is being forced to answer the wrong question. All right. I was at the meeting on April 6th. I listened to the presentation. It helped refresh myself. I went back to it this morning. I watched it again. 96 views are recorded on that presentation. All right. So that information was not available to an awful lot of people. And unfortunately, because of the rush to proceed with this question in the secret ballot referendum format, those of us gathered here tonight aren't going to have the chance to talk about it again at town meeting. Many questions have been put to this town over the years, all right? They've been discussed, they've been voted upon and handled in that public forum. This is it for the public forum. And I'm encouraged that so many people are here tonight to try to gather information for themselves, all right? And I hope that you reach the same consensus that in your own view, that report did not offer solutions. When I questioned Barney about his activities, all right, he constantly said that his whole system was going to be anchored by the existing retaining wall. When questioned about what the existing retaining wall was, he meant the little cedar pegs that are sticking out of the beach. That's where he started, okay? He wanted to anchor his geotextile fabric to that and work on up. The vast majority of his solution was below the highest annual tide. So he was going to put plantings of dune grass below high water. And when those of us in attendance started to hear this and raise questions, all right, and when the selectmen were asked to proceed afterwards, I thought they got the right answer, which was let's wait. Let's find the right solution and let's act when we're better informed. But regretfully, right now, the people in this town are being asked to vote on a question that was hastily worded. There's no consideration in there for any other option for this town. We have to endorse Barney's presentation on April 6th. I was there. I can't endorse that presentation, and I urge you all to vote no. But at the same time, use the same voice we've had tonight to get access to the beach. All right, that's what it's all about. It's not about the secret referendum saying that everything has to be done in this fashion in the year 2022. For anyone trying to do any kind of a project, that's highly unlikely. Even if this passes, that all of this would come to pass as they try to dictate to the board. So again, I regret the secret referendum process. I wish it was raised in the tradition of, all right, a petition warrant that could be publicly discussed. The language is firm. Over the next, whatever, 10 days, 2 weeks, none of us are going to be able to meet and talk. This is it for discussion, all right? So I urge you all to vote no. Let's start over.
All right, who's next? Okay, somebody's got the hand up on her. Barbara.
I'm Barbara Porter. I live at 27 Soul Road. I have a simple-minded question to ask. I've been listening and thinking about this for a while. I'd like to know what kind of thing Carol, for example, has in mind when she talks about we ought to think about adaptation. I have a feeling it's not an 80-foot ramp, that there may be lots of other alternatives. I don't know what they are. It's hard to decide when I have no idea at all what other possibilities there might be. And it seems really clear that a lot of people in the town want to keep some kind of access and want not to lose that access to that strange, wonderful place. And that's really it. What is adaptation? And if we don't talk about it tonight, and we're going pretty long, then let's figure out a place and a time and a way when we can also explore this question of adaptation. Is it real? Does it work? What could we do? Is it expensive? Is it? That's all that I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Mark. Before we have people speak again, I'm gonna open up to the board if there's no one else in the audience.
Mark Dyer, 232 North Road. I don't know if I know what adaptation is, Barbara, but at the meeting when Barney did his presentation, I listened to the presentation. I looked at what he was talking about. I agree with what Paul Valeska just said. He was proposing anchoring some geotextile to the existing, what's left of them cedar posts down there coming up out of the beach. I didn't see that as being very feasible. That's one reason I didn't vote for it that night. I think maybe what adaptation or consideration of a different way to get down to the hook would be to try to talk with the neighborhood affected, which would be the Ballard Breed family, about some sort of a parking area up higher and some sort of an access down to the ledgy area that Bob Ernest was referring to. Maybe that involves a long ramp, maybe it involves a trail, I don't know. Maybe that's what adaptation might mean. I suggested that lightly at that meeting in April. It might be worth considering. I'm not sure, even if we had what we felt was a good engineered plan, that we could hold it down there. I think Ernie and Carol White and others are correct. I used to spend a lot of time down there. I haven't lately. Been too busy working. I don't think you're gonna stop Mother Nature down there easily, certainly. And I don't know if we should be spending a lot of time and funds to do that. It breaks my heart because I realize we've got an agreement existing with the Indian Island Corporation. I respect the access that they've given the public for a long, long time. I know a lot of the people quite well. I respect the fact that they want to access the area themselves, but I think adaptation might be looking at it from a different angle. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there someone else on the board who would like to speak? Okay, I will. You can take over. I guess what I'd like to say is that a point that no one has made is that we are in a difficult position down there. The road is closed. The town cannot open it because it's not safe. There's liability issues. And nobody's talking about this being a permanent fix. But the question is, do we want to be able to at least stabilize the road while people come up with some other kind of a plan? Basically, that's what this would do, is give time, would be to provide some time to do something. I have to say, I have not seen a lot of activity of people trying to solve this problem. We have heard about adaptation. We've heard about different ideas. As Carol or somebody said, a lot of this is experimental, and it may work in the long run. But we need to do something right now if we want to be able to try to at least hold things while we can come up with something else. Because if we don't do anything, the only thing we can be sure of is that the road will be gone. And then you can adapt all you want, but how is the rest of going to get down there? How are elderly people going to get down there and be able to come back up the road? How will the clam diggers be able to dig their clams and bring them up the road? So the bottom line is, do we want to try to do something that's a stopgap while we try to figure out a longer term solution? Or do we just want to give up and spend the next 3 years talking about it while the road and the whole area deteriorates? That's really what the question is. The question is, do we want to do something that has the potential to give us a little bit more time to come up with something else? That really is the bottom line. And, you know, everybody can shoot arrows across the bow and say, this isn't a good plan, that's not a good plan. The bottom line is, we know if we don't do something, that it's gonna be too late. So really, that's where people, I believe people are, where we should be. And I don't want to get into a debate about it, but that's my personal opinion, is that when nobody's talking about a long-term thing. A lot of this adaptation stuff is great, but it's experimental. Just like, for example, the mess that we're in with dredging, they were supposed to, this is another adaptation thing. They were going to transplant eelgrass, and they tried it in the Piscataqua River, and that would have offset some of the costs that we had to pay. And it all died. So you just don't know. You can replant dune grass, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You can take lobster traps and fill them up with rocks. That can work in some places and it doesn't. There's nothing that's a guarantee. There's no guarantee that something won't wash out tomorrow. But somebody's got to act, and they've got to do something, or we don't have that access. And right now, I do not see how that road can be opened in the condition it is this summer. So I just wanted to say that. Okay. Carol? And we don't want to get into back and forth here. I mean, I'm just giving you my opinion.
My opinion is we have tried to do something other, you know, it isn't as though no one's come forward. I did come to the selectmen over a year ago and suggest we consider some alternatives. I did ask Pete Slavinsky to make a presentation to the community, which he did in October of 2021. It was very well attended. And it was about exactly this issue in relation to shorefront armoring, beach stabilization, and he talked about adaptation strategies. And adaptation, it isn't all experimental technology. It's very well proven techniques that have been used in Europe. I think we are learning that the man-made structures really don't solve the problem, as somebody mentioned. I think it was Mark, Mother Nature wins in the end. So I think, you know, I don't like hearing the situation characterized in that way, because I don't think it's appropriate. And I have made suggestions multiple times over the past couple of years about options that we could pursue. And Pete had, I don't know if anybody attended Pete's presentation, but I think, you know, and he is willing to work with the community. He is responsible for monitoring the fluctuations on that beach. And it's up on the state's website, and he is responsible for coming down here to look at that beach on an annual basis. So he's a very good resource that we could access if we really want to pursue some alternatives. And I don't think that if we don't do something, it will be lost forever. I do not agree with that statement.
Thank you, Carol. Bob?
Just two small things. One, I would encourage everybody to think about access and adaptation as two separate but related topics. As I mentioned earlier, there are alternatives to preserve access down there for the ambulance, for clammers, for elderly people. There are good alternatives for that. And within a couple of months of good faith negotiation with the land trust, Indian Island people in the town, that could happen. I really believe that. Adaptation means, among other things, taking out old structures and letting nature work the way it's intended to work with a coastal barrier dune system. In this case, that's what adaptation is referring to. This is a specific coastal barrier dune system. It's not going to work well with man-made structures getting in the way. It can work well with engineered approaches that utilize natural elements of that system to help it thrive. And that could include replanting dune grass in a logical fashion, not below the low tide line, but in a logical fashion. So think about access and adaptation as two different things. Adaptation has to do with how we can help that area remain healthy and viable for as long as it can, given rising sea levels. Sea levels go up another foot, all bets are off. That place won't be there. It'll be overwashed. It'll be a dune, it'll be a sandbar, but it won't be a coastal dune with dune grass growing. But for the next 10 or 20 years, 30 years, it could be restored to where it was a beautiful part of the island. Access is a separate issue. And again, there are solutions there. I believe that. Second point, Vika, you said you had posted the updated information. It's a 4-page executive summary.
There's 2 different documents.
There's only one posted on the June 1 link. So there
If
is
you
a,
click on
there's-
June 1, there should be 3 links under there.
right, I did. So
I
on
checked
the
it right before I left work and there were 3 links.
June 1, there are 3 links. The first one is the public hearing on June 1.
Yeah,
The second is the assessment presented by Barney Baker on April 6th.
yes,
The third one is the Indian Point Resiliency Study Summary.
yes.
So one of them is the public hearing PDF, and that's just the notice of the meeting.
Yeah,
One of them is the presentation, which is a PowerPoint that Paul
Yeah.
referred to earlier.
yeah.
And the third is what we just received tonight. What did we just receive today that you were referring to?
The executive summary.
Okay, so
Resilience.
there's nothing in the executive summary that's new. There's
Because
no,
it's just a recap. What we received tonight was a final presentation,
Got it.
the resiliency assessment, which is what the PowerPoint was presented. And then in addition, to simplify it for people, he did the executive summary, so I
Got it.
posted those
Okay.
2 things.
I had the impression from comments earlier that it was a new and updated, different solution presentation. Okay, so it's what we saw on June 6th, April 6th. I would point out that the central paragraph under task 2 states, Indian Point area, Great Chebeague, part of the Jenks Landing, Waldo Point Federal Unit, blah, 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 Coastal Barrier Resource System. The Coastal Barrier Resource System programs are intended to protect natural coastal systems from development by prohibiting any state or federal funding to be used on the site. While the CBRS designation does not prohibit site improvements, it effectively discourages development by making CBRS sites ineligible for state or federal funding or grant programs. I don't always agree that the government does smart things, but I will go out on a limb and say smart people came up with the CBRS system. People whose job is to care for the kind of natural systems that make this a special place. I think we really ought to tap into their expertise on how to keep that special place special and treat the access issue as a separate topic that we can address.
Okay, is there anyone else? Yes, I see a hand in the back. Kendra.
Kendra McKinnon, 227 South Road. And this has been great for me because I really didn't understand what the conflict was. And I do better understand and appreciate everybody who has spoken here tonight. 2 things. What Bob just said is what has been in my mind a little bit, the access. And forgive me because I don't know the rules of what's signed, but can't we use some of that money to get access to the beach? Do we have to use it all for, because I do believe the beach is a whole separate thing. It's going to keep changing. So if we could use some of that money so that the rescue could get down there, so that people can get down there easily, that would be a start. But I don't know if that's possible.
Well,
I don't
that's
know.
actually part of this whole thing. It would be, the
If I read
To
it.
fix the road, no, well, I mean, that's the whole idea is to fix.
So
the
can we do,
access.
is that possible? That we could really start the process with the road for the people and then long-term look at different solutions that hopefully will come forward that make a little bit more sense than the one that we've got right now.
Well, it's kind of, the way this is, they've got to stabilize the bank in order to fix the road. So that question, so to get access, you got to stabilize.
So there's, okay, well, that's what I
However
needed.
you stabilize it with this plan or another plan, but in order for the road to be usable.
I want to start at the road go down so that the rescue people could use it. So maybe that's not feasible.
But the problem is when you get down there, the roads, it's going to the side, so you've got to shore up the side.
Okay. Thank you.
But no, that's a good idea.
Well, it's maybe. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant. All right, anyone else? All right, I would like to, anybody from the board, one more shot? Okay. I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. I'd like to thank everyone for being very respectful of each other. And I hope that you go and talk to each other and do some research and really think about where you want to be on this issue. And now, I hope you don't overhold it, because we have a lot of good stuff going on here tonight. We're gonna send millions of dollars to the meeting, so it's your opportunity. So it's all
Thank you all very much.
You know what we should. Thank you. Take care.
Okay, we're going to start.
So unless you're staying, can we take the conversation outside, please? Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is, all these people left, public comments for items not on the agenda. Michael?
Maybe. I have a question. I noticed that in speaker's report, Jennifer Cromwell said something about access.
We'll get to that when I get to the report.
Okay, so this is not that.
No, she's gonna talk about
So I
that.
should ask that question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything? Okay, seeing none, let's keep on going here. The town administrator report.
All right, so,
You don't have one either?
No.
None of us have one. Was it emailed? Did you email us that?
the town administrator's report, yes, I emailed it to all of you on Friday.
Also, it wasn't.
Jay
in the
got it.
packet. Okay, sorry, it wasn't. in the packet.
If Jay got it, everybody has to have got
None of you got it? Okay.
I don't know where I saw it. I thought I had it in my packet. I remember seeing it.
I'll hear it now.
Okay, so, well, good, then this will be all just surprise, and I'll start on a good note. We have an auditing firm that has agreed to take us on as a client. Even better, their proposal originally to do the 2021 audit was at $16,500. And I, after communicating with them, told them we only had 10 grand in the budget for this year. So they're willing to do our 2021 audit for $10,000, our 2022 audit for $18,000. And then if we want to keep them for later years, then they will reassess their price based on that.
Nice job.
It's a company called RHR Smith and Company. They're out of Old Orchard. I also found out that they are the ones that are doing the Vinyl Haven audit, so Marjorie's working with them, so that makes me feel a little bit more confident. But either way, what I need from you is, because the Board of Selectmen appoint the auditor, so I need from you a motion to appoint RHR Smith and Company as the town auditor and to authorize me to sign the contract, and then we can proceed with getting the 2021 audit complete. The biggest reason why it really needs to be done sooner than later is because the school subsidies are dependent on them needing to be audited, and they're on their third extension. So the sooner we can get the ball rolling on this, the better.
Okay, so is there a motion?
I move that we hire RHR Smith and Company as the auditors at the amounts for the 2 annual audits that we did as described, namely $10,000 for 2021 and $18,000 for 2022.
Second.
Okay, so moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the board, Mark?
I should know this answer, but how much did we put in the budget for this next year?
18. And so what they were anticipating to do was, they took our 2020 audit and all our financial statements and looking at base where the numbers are, what the demands are. They came back with a proposal saying 16.5 for 2021 and 16.5 for 2022. And after calling them, I said, we don't have the money in our budget right now to cover it with the end of, so he was, really accommodating. They put us for 10 grand for this year, for last year's, 18 for the next year's budget. So that's basically saving us 5 grand that we would have otherwise had to come up. And then I'm assuming, for next year's budget, we'll worry about that when we get there.
Thank you.
Okay, any more, anybody else?
Just a dumb question, but
There's no dumb questions.
did, check their credentials?
Yeah, they've been around for many years. They have a number of towns. I think one of the things that they're doing, unlike other towns or other auditor firms where they're dropping all the little guys and picking up the big guys where they can make more money, I think they're trying to do the other direction of it, where they're picking up less clients, knowing that they'll work through it a little quicker. And so I had a Zoom where I met with 3 of them. I think the owner is going to be a lot of energy, but I think he'll be fine. And just knowing that they're going to be working with Vinyl Haven and Marjorie dealing with them, I'm ready to roll.
Oh, good job.
Thank you. Your vote.
Okay, all in favor? Yeah.
The next thing is just the dredging update. Mark Cable was on the island 2 weeks ago, and at this point, there's not much that can be updated publicly other than the fact that Army Corps of Engineer needs to determine if the dredging company completed the full job. And so they've been making trips out here. Once we get all those full reports, then we will proceed publicly to make if it was completed, if not, to make the public determinations of do we accept the completion as it is, or do we want them to come back and finish it, or so forth. And so that's kind of just an ongoing.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the dredging, it just has to do with, the meeting. Basically, we did a vote again, we just did it again, we voted on it, and it wasn't in there stating that we were gonna vote. So either we do, put it in the town as a future, in the future, put town reports and put the town administrator and then maybe possible action or something like
I
that.
think
So
that's a
that
good
way,
idea.
it just clarifies it, because we talked about this several times already. And I know it's been done before in past meetings and stuff, even before I was on. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
just
a good
trying to get
idea.
better at it. And keep
The same idea as we saying take possible, possible action, so if we always say with the town administrator's report and take possible action, that's a really good idea. What do you guys think? Is that, everybody okay with that one? Yeah, that's a good idea, Bill, thank you. So everybody okay with the dredging, Jen?
Because so do we think that the Army Corps will give us some sort of report through the summer so that then, because isn't it feasible that we are hoping that if they didn't finish and they are required to come back, that will happen in the fall?
Yes.
Yeah, they'll update as soon as they have
So
all
with the way our budget is set up right now and the way we had the vote last year to authorize, going and to bond for up to $250,000. If there are changes, we have anticipated extra money that we would potentially, or we have the authority to borrow that additional money if we have to. So. The next thing is road work. So Doug Fowler came out, Mark joined us for the meeting and it was helpful. The date has now been changed for the third time for them to begin the project, and that's being pushed to July 5th. I'm not gonna read this whole thing. Well, I guess I will because you guys don't see it. So the date has once again been pushed back to July 5th for the crew to come to the island and complete the single and double chip seal project on many of the roads. We do not yet have a proposal for the contract to complete the cold mix asphalt project on the 4 of our roads, which was the Old Car, Caps, Fenderson, and Chandlers. This contract has not been approved for me to sign. You did indicate setting money aside into capital reserve in this budget to complete that project. There is currently $185,246 in the paving reserve account with a proposed 125 added at the town meeting. After July 1st, we would anticipate to have $310,246 in that account. For the chip seal project, originally we anticipated to pay $150,000. Which with the quote for the cold mix is $139,000, leaving us with about a $21,000 cushion to offset any increases in the costs. I did get an email back from him. So the project that is estimated to begin July 5th, because of the cost of asphalt, has now risen an additional $6,200. So that brings us to having a cushion of $14,734, which hopefully if you choose to sign the contract and proceed with the cold mix asphalt project in the current budget year for the 2023 budget year that we're working with the town warrant, then I'm hoping that that doesn't increase by any more than $14,000. If it does, then we have to go out and ask the town for more money, or keep that money and then push it towards, you know, the next budget year, and then budget more money for that budget year, so. But I emailed him today, he was working on it, he didn't get back to me in time for me to have those numbers, so.
Yeah.
So now the chip sealing project is increased by $11,000 to $12,000 from our last approved contract. Is that accurate? Okay, because he didn't tell me before I left the meeting that was a possibility. I was on the end of the impression that the paving was going to increase.
It's what the increase is on the liquid asphalt material, which is in both projects.
Yeah. So just a couple more points if I may, John. So just during that ride around, Doug Fowler pointed out to you and I, Vika, that he would like to have those sections that are going to be chip sealed sweet. So are you in Public Works working on a possible machine to bring over here?
Yeah, so I met with Chuck. They are going to get a sweeper out here. He knows that he needs to have the roads be swept, and then the roads that have any bumps that have been, you know, the boulders taken out, as you refer to it, as shimmed. So they're gonna cover all of the roads prior to them coming in July 5th, and they're going to have those roads swept, as well as any bumps raised up or holes raised up to an even level, so then it's fully prepared for the project.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Don.
Yeah, anyone else have a question about the asphalt and it's all because of oil, right? The price of oil, probably. Okay.
Good.
Yep.
Next thing is transfer station. I know we're gonna be getting into about transfer station in general, but this is a little side piece. Gail Jenkins has asked me if you as a board would be willing to open back up what she refers to as the Macy's, which is the area next to the building where people used to be able to leave things. She's getting a lot of questions from people asking why it's closed. People want to be able to put things in, and you have made the decision to keep it closed, and so she asked me to bring it back up, and so here I am.
I'll weigh in on this one, and I would like everybody else to weigh in too. I think it's, you know, people have enjoyed that in the past, that they've totally used it. And the subcommittee for, and both can attest to this, we had a long discussion about it. And people just drop stuff off there instead of paying them for it. And in addition to that, I mean, stuff that nobody's really gonna want, and then it gets like an old couch with half the pillows missing, and then it gets thrown into the dumpster and we all pay for it. Or a bag, I went up there one day and there was a bag of clothes with old sneakers kicking out of it. And I'm sure that nobody ever wanted anything that was in that bag. And I guess my feeling is that it's so complicated up there right now, and it's complicated if we get into the, you know, if we decide to pay for the wood dump and everything else. I don't think that having one or even two attendants up there, they can watch it. And I've been up there when people have dumped stuff off. Aunt Baxter, I was doing redemption, she was doing the dump. We had everything all cleaned up, it had been very quiet, hardly anybody had been in there, the next thing we knew, there was a bureau with two drawers missing. And we never even saw the people drop it off, and we were, you know, I mean, it wasn't even crazy busy. So my gut feeling is just one person would be to say, unfortunately, no, and that it's, and she shouldn't have to take the brunt of it. You know, if this board decides that they're not going to support it, then she just needs to say, it's not me, it's them. But that's my feeling. Anybody else, Bo, what do you think? You were in that discussion.
So, yeah, basically, it's the same thing you were talking about. I've gone up there several times where there's like a metal lawn chair there with nothing on it. And I asked the person that left it, why are you leaving that there? Well, it could be just easily reached back.
Not easy.
So I just walked away and didn't say anything. My thoughts are, we have a small facility up there, a limited room. We're currently trying to find how we can easily facilitate that for everybody. Gail and whoever else works there can't keep an eye on everything. And I think it'll be used like Donna said, and yeah, I think it's a bad choice to restart that.
Mark, Jim, Jay, any thoughts?
Yeah. I think if Gail is willing to try and manage it, I think opening it, try it for a little while, and if it gets abused, you know, after a month, close it off and say, you know, we tried, you've abused it, that's the end of it. But I think people really, I mean, I can think of a half dozen people that go up to the transfer station to check out and see what's there to pick up. I mean, you know. So I think that if she's comfortable thinking that she can manage it to some extent, that we should go ahead and let her do it. With the caveat that if it doesn't work after a month or, you know, gets out of hand, that we're just closing.
Oh, I think we did that during COVID. We stopped it and then we started it again and she was unable to manage it and that's what happened. But what do you think, Mark or Jen?
I think that it's not necessary. If you have something good that you think somebody else might like or might want, you can bring it to as my grandmother used to call it, the boutique. Take it to the Grange. There's, you know, that's a place for it. This is the dump. This is where we're throwing things away. And, you know, Gail tries to keep things picked up and, you know, as clean and what a job that is. So I don't think she needs to have to monitor a whole bunch of other stuff, personally.
What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I wish I could say I think it's a great idea. I've talked with Gail a little bit about this directly, and I just, you know, without being her direct supervisor, and that's our town administrator, I said to her, I think maybe there's plenty of other things to be doing. The monitoring, the swap and save sections, so.
Well, I'm just thinking of, you know, in the future, if we ever rearrange it and get more space, that might be something that a nonprofit wanted to do or whatever, but we have the Red Studio, we have the Grange, and, you know, we could make a sign up there that suggests, you know, call this person if you have something, call this person for something else, or why don't people just put it on their own lawn and say, come and get it, it's free. You know, I mean, that's another option. Maybe people haven't even thought of that. Every once in a while, you see somebody who has a chair
We do that.
or whatever, you know, and that might be an option. But, anyway, so I think it's 4-1. Is that in consensus? Everybody? You're a nice guy, Jim. Yeah.
Shale raised it, we could raise it a little. Maybe if there was a sign there saying it wasn't her decision.
Right.
The board of selectmen to determine that this is not going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. She shouldn't have to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable if I put a sign on there saying Board of Selectmen determined to keep Macy's closed until further notice?
Yeah. And, you know, go to the Red Studio, go to the Grange, or put it out on the lawn. Or pay, you know, throw it away and pay.
Until further notice, but don't hold your breath.
That'll help getting people run.
Well, I said a car came out there with a broken leg today.
You need to move on, please.
Yeah, let's go.
Next thing is coastal water access. So, Public Works with the communications through the code enforcement officer removed the old walkway at Chandler's and updated with a new and improved one. In addition to that, I did talk to Chuck to see if there's, I had spoken to Donna, if there's any kind of ramp or anything that they could, or a handle that they could put up to, make it easier to walk down the little, bump. And, with conversation with our code enforcement officer, because it falls within the 75 feet of high tide watermark, anything else other than that was done would require DEP permitting. So, if we want to put anything else in there, then we need to proceed with the permit to do so.
So what would that entail? Because I really do think that for safety, we need to at least have a road for, we need something that people can hold on to when they go down there, because it really is, after they took out those, timbers, either that or put the timbers back or something, but it's just straight down, and the first part of it is very steep. And
Can I put back in?
Yeah.
How come he allowed the new ramp to be built down on the beach, but
Because the ramp that came out, the new ramp replaced an existing structure that was there, which made it, but with the timbers, the way that the timbers were put in and the shape that they were in, when they were removed, to put anything else there would require digging up the ground and securing it, or steps, or you know, putting holes in the dirt to put a railing or anything, all of that would require a permit.
so I guess my question would be, can we get on the fast track to figure out how to get a railing so that somebody can, so that people like Sheila Jordan who came here, and Jackie Trask, and Elizabeth Dowdy, who brought it up in the first place, that people can use it?
But again, not to beat this up, did Jim Butler, the code officer, was he clear that we asked about the existing aluminum ramp at the, was he clear on that?
I think so, but I'd have to double check with him.
I don't even think you need. a
Oh,
ramp.
wait, there was something, hold on, I have to double check, but there was a conversation that I had where that aluminum in location is, it wouldn't be the appropriate or proper ramp. The one that you're talking about, that was the hook, yes, it wouldn't work, is basically, I don't remember the details, but it wouldn't work.
Well, just ask him if there's, what we have to do to just put in some poles and a rope that people can hold on to while they're going down.
No, we were talking about the big 36-foot ramp at the public works garage out in the bushes.
Yeah, there was whatever, I don't remember the details, but I do recall that it wouldn't work.
I want to make sure Jim Butler and DEP is making this call,
I will talk.
and you.
Oh, Bob, sorry.
Just quickly, I've studied those in depth. What you cannot do is penetrate the ground. What you can do is what Mark's talking about, a ramp that the railings are attached to the ramp. So the issue with the 36-footer might be that it's so much egregiously longer than what was there before. It's not replacing something that was already there, but it's still, if it even needs a permit, it's easily permitted because it's not going into the ground. So it should be easy, but.
Could you put a bunch of, like wood chips to level it off and then slap the ramp on there? Is that,
As long as you're not penetrating the ground.
It's just, there's only that little tiny space that it's really steep and it levels off. So it's only a.
But if you put a ramp down there, that's not gonna solve the problem. It's gonna still make it steep if you put,
Right, you
because
just need something to hold on to.
But we specifically asked you, in my recollection, to ask Jim Butler if that could be permitted to use that.
are you talking about permitted to use it where the wooden structure was put in? Or where the bump is to make that?
From the top of the banking where the bump is,
Okay,
down to where it levels off.
my
Just sitting-
recollection is
Just
that,
sitting there, I think Bob's point is Jim Butler and DEP might look at it as a temporary structure. Because if they're allowed to get down and set something right on the sand dune, I can't believe you can't set something, 75 or 80
all right,
feet.
I'll double check with them on it again. In addition to that, so Coastal Water Commission, as I had said before, agreed to take on some of these discussions and talk about what they want to do to proceed. They do have a meeting that is scheduled for June 16th at 6 p.m. at the town office. And once they have an agenda, they will share that with us, where more of the coastal water access will be discussed. Similar but separately, I received communications from Jennifer Hamilton asking if something could be done at Hamilton Beach access to make it easier. I talked to Chuck to take a look at it. He has not had a chance to do anything about it or really look at it. But he is gonna see if he's able to remove a couple of the small rocks and if they're able to put something in there just to, once again, make it safer. But I also haven't had time to touch base with Jim about that either.
So I have a quick question, because maybe you can ask Jim when he's in the office again. So when people are building steps on the shore, I'm sure that they're getting some kind of permit, right? And so either that or they're just doing it, but, you know, you see people's steps coming up all over the place. So just to find out, you know, how complicated is it and what kind of paperwork you have to fill out? And can we get the code enforcement officer to fill it out? If you know how it works.
Well, we have to get it, I know we have to get a building permit, and then it has to go to DEP. It's within 75 feet, you gotta go through them, and then you basically a permit by rule, which you have to have it either engineered or architect or you know, they need to have.
We got a little plan.
A proper plan.
But I
And then-
mean, we're talking 2 or 3 steps, and that doesn't seem like a major, and we've got some money in there.
It might not be major, but I think the process is still.
Right, but if we don't start it, it won't get.
It's not as scary as everybody makes it seem. Most that I've seen from DEP is, sometimes it takes a length of time to get moved.
Right, so.
But that's about it.
Yeah.
It's not and most of the time they'll end up working with. the
And try to
community.
help you figure out what's the
Yeah,
best
correct.
plan, right? Okay, that's great.
And
Michael.
Yeah. I wanted to read into the record that when you're talking about the Hamilton Beach, I assume you're talking about Willow Street.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's the only place, really on Hamilton Beach where the land comes down with the water.
right.
And it's really important for people, all have roadways and bad weather or, trailers, folks who pick up and carry and drive. So I don't want to, really not like to see something in there that made it easier for people with inhibited moving funds.
But it's one of the few places that people, that's accessible to people who are challenged physically too. So there's gotta be something in between, something that could be hauled out if people like to haul boats or,
Yeah, something with time.
Well, we have 32 feet here.
Yeah.
33 feet.
Yeah.
No, I take that back, there's only 20 feet here.
Okay.
But 20 feet, there's 10 feet for the pedestrians and 10 feet for the pulley.
That's fine. I wanted to put it on record that it is important that the both parties.
So, because that's something to check or the postal waters or whoever's working on it, that if they did something, don't put it right in the middle of the 20 feet.
Yeah.
Is that the point? Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. So the room on the side, 4 or 5 feet.
Yeah, I forgot that road is only 20 feet wide. Okay, so let's move on quickly. Oh, we got one more, or text messages?
I don't know if I can find my document with the email from, John. So the last thing is text message updates. And so we've used a company called TextMarks the last 2 years for text message updates. Basically, that company has gone out of service and they closed down with very little notice to their users. It was replaced by another company. John Emery was the one that worked with the people that set this up initially, and it was paid for 2 years with the grant program. That was due to run out in October. Effective June 1st, we no longer have the ability to do any kind of text alerts. So this is something that we ultimately need to I would suggest have an agenda item and just expect that for now, we're not gonna have that service. If you want that service, and determine whether you want to have a new company that we use for that. With what John Emery had proposed, it's gonna be anywhere between $80 and $140 a month to do that.
Can you pay in advance?
He could probably, I think that with something like that, we would have to have some kind of an agreement with them where, we would pay them in advance, but then they would pay monthly. But the tricky part about that is all of these services have now transitioned to per text message cost. So if, you would pay $140 a month, but you would have so many text messages, and if you go over that, if you have to on average send out 5 text messages a month, it's not just 5 for the 500 people that are signed up, it's 5 times 500.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And so
Oh,
it makes it harder to do any kind of payment in advance, which is why they do it monthly now. And then if you go over that expected, then they charge you per text message.
Do you
So
have money in the budget for next year that would cover this?
it's, so if you do the $140, that's $1,600. I mean, we can try to squeeze our technology to make it work, but it would make it, so, technology, we would call, the tech company less frequently, let's just put it that way.
Question over there.
Yes.
What's your average number of texts that you send out? I mean, do you really think you'd go over 6 per se per month?
So after talking to John looked at all of the data. It was 4 to 5 text messages a month. Some months it was more frequent than others. And it is like the old school phones, it's rollover. So if we don't use our, 5 average on a month, then they roll over so we can accumulate. So, on months like this where I would potentially send out, don't forget about the annual town meeting or Board of Selectmen or more frequent, then it would kind of accommodate there. But it is a service that people have provided positive feedback in the town, so I think it's important for us to keep it and figure out a way to make it work. We are going to have, and this was in the email that I sent you on Friday with the attachment, he is going after the old company for a partial refund. So I'm not sure if it's something, for now, I just wanted it to be on your radar that this is happening, so then you knew that the text mark was no longer in service. And then the idea is that on the next agenda, we'll probably put it on to have a more thorough discussion to see what the outcome should be.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan, Chris can add it to your list. Anybody else?
I think it's been a terrific service.
Yeah, I think
We've
it's
used
been
it
great.
very well.
It's been one of the positives from the grant, I think. Okay. All right, and is that it for you, Lisa?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so next is 22, now to vote on the public hearing to take action on the special amusement and victuals licenses. Is there someone who'd like to make a motion for the Two Bird Cafe? Yes, Mark.
I'll make a motion to approve the victuals license and the special amusement permit for the Two Birds Cafe LLC.
Is that contingent upon?
Contingent on passing all necessary steps.
I'm sorry, what was the last word you said?
All necessary inspection, contingent upon all necessary inspection. And it's been seconded by Bo, you're seconded this board, right? Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Any abstention?
I'm abstaining.
Okay, we have 1 abstention and 4 yeses. Okay, so the next thing quickly is to discuss the proposed solid waste ordinance changes. I'm going to turn this over to Bo and Lisa. They have worked really hard on this. And, it may not be perfect, but it's a place to start, and it can always be revised at the next town meeting.
So may I ask the rest of the board, see if they have any questions on the ordinance changes that were made Also the policy, the rules, regulations. That's it.
Yeah, I went through the whole thing and it all made sense and I thought it all was done well. I got to page 4, item 6, commercial users of brush dump / woodpile facility may have individual contracts with the town. The town will set annual fees ranging from 1 to 5,000 based on quantity and so forth. My thought was to stop it after the town will set annual fees, because the fees are really part of another document. This is the only fee mentioned in the whole ordinance.
And it's like we took out the other one.
That's where we have a surprise for you. Do you want to go or just tell on?
Well, we don't have, well, you start talking about it, but, so we want to try to get, so the initial, we met with the contractors, mainly the main people that use it, on the island. Talked to them about how much they use it, all that. And talked to them about the feasibility of working with the current hours of the dump operates, which we know in the summertime would not be very nice, especially with a few of them that quite frequently go down. So we asked them for solutions. Solutions were, some of them were to make the dump bigger, which is not solving the problem, it's just making it bigger. So one that was said by Chuck actually, was to put a gate there and have people gain access and have a card to gain access into the dump. That way it would be monitored, and it would be kind of kept track of. So the only thing that we had a thing on was a fee, since certain ones use the dump more often than the other ones, should be paying more, either per trip or per whatever. So it would be a contract, individual contracts with the contractors with a number on there that would say, I'll bring in 300 loads every year, I'm gonna pay X amount. Somebody else is gonna bring 20 loads a year, I'm gonna pay X amount, but I take out mulch also. So basically monitoring that would be, if you see it, this one, I got a couple quotes, you guys got the quotes. From Postal overhead doors. So there's cameras. They take the camera, who goes in, who goes out. So they go in, they type their number in, which would be for a card or whatever. It would be noticed that they went in, and then you could see on the camera, see if they had anything on their truck or not. So if they didn't have anything in their truck, that means they're going to get mulch. Come back out. So we just haven't come to an agreement as far as how much to charge and where to proceed from here. So I was gonna approach the board and recommend for this meeting, for this, the fee structure that we currently have, take out the fee for the brush and the fee for the bulk wood, which I believe is $10 and $100, if I remember right.
Yes.
Until we have a solid plan in place.
And then you can just, as long as this says there can be a plan, then you can set those dates, those amounts later on.
Correct. In the current ordinance,
Makes sense.
and the current policy states that fees may apply.
Yeah.
So it gives us the room to later on, once we get a plan in place, and a proper, you know, contract for the contractors, that we can, you know, establish the fees there.
Is this a one-time charge, this $10,000 or $12,000? I mean, that's not every year, right?
One to
No,
5,000?
this is just to buy this,
For the equipment.
estimate,
Fence.
estimate time, 1098. This will buy the access portal with a camera, which is I don't know if it's gonna be a push dial or something, I can get more information on this. But anyway, and we take a picture of who's doing it, plus the 17-foot mega arm, which is just basically a big arm gate. And then, you know, 10 hours of labor. The other one is the same access portal with the camera, but this one is a sliding gate. And then, so the difference is the first one, the town can put up the fences on either side. And because if they're crooked, it doesn't really matter. He said pretty much the only thing they'll have to do is pour a slab for the arm, the big arm. This one here, probably have to hire somebody to put up the fence, because the fence is gonna need to be level, straight, and properly put in
And
place.
somehow it gets hit, then it's moved, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And this one slides back and forth, so it's
Yeah.
the whole fence slides out of the way. So his recommendation, which is Harry Espinero, was the 17-foot mega arm.
So where's this money coming from? From the fees you're gonna,
So some of the money will be from the fees, you know, obviously there is some initial costs, so
do we have it? in the
it boils back down to the planner. I was planning on putting a gate in, so,
Yeah,
but we do need, it might come out of facilities, which is, to me,
Building facilities is one of the locations that is covered. The transfer station is covered under building facilities reserve now.
so that was my thought, would be that.
and so we would spend 10,000, or we don't have to pay tax to you for a town.
No, we don't.
Okay, so we'd be spending around $10,000 as a one-time charge, and then going forward, we would expect to be taking in somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000 from these contractors.
That's so the idea would be, the idea is if you start charging for the brush dump and the wood pile, you'd be charging it to everybody across the board. You know, under the descriptions that you guys approved. So if I'm bringing in a pickup truck of brush pile, I pay $10, so I go through Gale. With these specific contractors who use it more frequently and who need access to it, like BJ, for example, he goes in there at 7 o'clock in the morning and gets mulch, but he's not dumping nearly as much.
Right.
And so those people, based on their choice, if they choose to not use the regular business hours to dump, like within the transfer station hours, and pay $10, they come to the town comes onto an annual basis, an agreement with them, and set a fee schedule, a one-time fee that they pay for the year between 1,000 and 5,000. So somebody like Affordable Tree would pay $5 because they dump significantly more. Somebody like BJ would pay $1,000. That $1,000 would cover if he's dumping anything, but also that unlimited access to the transfer station to do that. And that's why,
And that's worth a lot to people.
and that's where you would collect that money from them if they choose to have that individual agreement, or if they don't want to come to the town and say, look, I want to come up with an individual agreement to have access, let's determine whether I need to pay 1 or 5, then everybody across the board, the dump brush is now closed by a gate, and we're collecting money from everybody coming through the other direction.
Mark, oh, I'm sorry, Jennifer.
So a couple things. who's or how you determine how much someone pays? Or, I mean,
And
they
this
could say, well, we're not gonna really use it that much.
This is where with the cameras and the access with, realistically, if, you know, if we had 5 people that came to the meeting, so with this could be maybe 5, maybe 10, that we would have these individual contracts. The first year, we would have the discussion and it would be on an honor system, you know, let's be real. And that's where when we talked, BJ was like, I'm not dumping nearly as much as I'm taking out. But the $1,000 would be worth it for him to have that access. And then based on, you know, after a year, keep track record, how many times they went in. You know, we're not looking at having somebody monitor this camera 24/7.
I was gonna say, who is
But,
responsible
you know,
for
after
sitting there
6
looking
months
at
or a couple
it?
months, kind of review some of the images to see and make that determination, and then renew it after that to see if it should be more or less.
Now, there might be a little more homework that needs to be done as far as the access portal, or whatever you want to call it. It might come with an individual program that you just click on and be like, this gentleman, this number went in there 400 times this year.
This is how we were looking to accommodate some of the commercial guys who were not thrilled with this idea, but then also make it so for everybody across the board, we are charging to dump, because, I mean, this year, we're gonna get a $21,000 bill for the mulchers. We just paid a $1,600 bill for the barging, and I mean, if you think about it, our public works crew spent a whole week there. That's 2 people at 40 hours. So you think about it, and you're creeping into the $30,000, $40,000 expense that one area is costing us. And so it's good that we're having these conversations, because we really got to start thinking of how we can recoup some of that money back.
So I totally appreciate all the time and effort you guys have put towards this, because it's not an easy, just one line fix. I get that. And the other concern I had was when Jim was here talking about how much he does for the town. What I thought about afterwards and what concerns me is the liability that the town has when he's up there with his crew that he says he's paying to go up there and take care of it and make it safe for everyone. Well, what happens when something if one of his crew members gets hurt while working at the town's facility? Do we have on record his liability insurance to make sure that he's covered?
So this is one of the things that within the individual contracts, which I talked to legal to try to get a sample one. They sent me one that was far more like an eco-main contract, they misunderstood what I was asking. But within those contracts, there would be wording that says, you know, dump at your own risk.
Yeah.
The other thing is I did check with legal, and because of the location being just open place and the transfer station not being accessible entirely, because if you think about the transfer station going into that will still remain closed. That creates us in a possibility where we're not liable, because that was one of the things that Bo had asked to ask, and I asked, and so us being able to, somebody like Jim, we do have on file his paperwork, but the fact that it's an open space without a physical building, we're not required to have an employee there monitoring it. If they dump or pick up at their own risk, we're covered. And if we have an individual contract with those people, allowing them access into that gate, if we have those individual contracts saying dump at your own risk, the town is not liable and it's time for it, we're covered.
Great, thank you.
Jay and then Bob.
Couple of things. One, I would highly recommend it as you go forward with this, that you forget about the mega arm gate. I've been in a business where they used those kind of gates for security purposes, people coming in and out of the campground when they weren't supposed to be and so forth. The question was how many pieces you had to replace a year. I mean, it happens, people hit them, people run into them. The sliding gate's gonna be a much more maintenance-free operation. The one thing that I'm concerned about is I think the concept of the camera and the portal needs a lot more work in the sense that you can't turn around and ask the office. By the way, who's reviewing all this tape to find out who was in and who was out? You know, if there's some way that the software is available, that, you know, they put the card in and that's what, you know, it's counting or something. But something needs to be done so that becomes practical. That's all I'm trying to say as you go forward. And I guess the last thing, the thought of the difference between what some contractors are doing and what others are doing is probably greater in my mind than 1 to 5,000. You know, whether it should be 100 to, you know, 500 to 5,000, or whether it should be 1,000 to 10,000. I don't know. Yeah.
So it boils back to my comment in the beginning that we need a plan, we need a proper plan. What we're proposing, what we approached you guys with is basically the beginning of the talk. I'm not saying that this is perfect. I'm not saying that this is gonna work. I'm just saying it's a step forward to trying to recoup some money to this town.
So just to step back for a minute, what we need to know tonight is the solid waste ordinance ready for town meeting? And does it have the language that will then enable you to create the plan without tying us into anything? That really is the question.
I think it does.
With the question of, with the fees, I mean, the other thing is you can just remove the $1,000 to $5,000 and just say the town will set annual fees.
I think that's what we should.
Based on the use. I mean, it's, the one thing that we try doing through this is making it so there is fluency and the flexibility to adopt what's here, but also make some changes. Ultimately, on May 4th, I believe it was, you guys adopted the fee structure. So it's, you know, and the biggest question is really the bulk and the brush pile. And that's where Gail can't monitor that if the other gate is open and people are coming and going as they please. I mean, people are dumping traps there when the dump's not open, and, you know, it's, so that's kind of, you know, putting a gate there and closing it. The one step further that we're going is recognizing that there are island businesses that would be significantly impacted and trying to work with them. So I think that if the 1 to 1,000 is the questionable, that would be removed, but the rest of it, I do think is pretty,
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel comfortable that it's solid enough to go forward.
Great. Bob.
No, Bob, and then I got something.
I would ask you to consider the fact that taxpayers are already paying taxes, so to charge taxpayers to dump household brush, I think is egregious. I think you gotta reconsider that. Separately, I think there's 3 classifications of contractors that are going in there with brush. There's people who do landscaping, there's people who do major brush clearing, there's people who cut trees. Only one guy on the island is cutting trees. There's a couple people who do major brush clearing. Those are 3 dramatically different usage patterns. Your challenge is $21,500, which is going to be $25,000 next year to Jamie Bisson, $2,000 next year for barging, $3,000 for the crew that's down there, $30,000. And you want to recoup a good bit of that. Set the fee structure for those 3 contractors based on knocking off 20,000 of that or 25,000 of that, and then negotiate the fees with individuals. And don't worry about gates and cameras and portals. That's all stuff that's going to break. And to Jay's point, it's trying to go through video and recap any data that's actually meaningful. That's a full-time job. You can't just look at the data and say, oh, that guy can't. You got to sit there and tally it all up and put it in a spreadsheet and all that kind of stuff. So I think the system is overly complex compared to what the need is. The need is just to recoup a major part of that $25,000 to $30,000 each year. And I think if you went to the contractors and said, let's negotiate a fee each year, they'd be a lot more
We
amenable to
did,
that.
that's where this $1,000 to $5,000 came from, because we sat down with them. The reason that we decided to add the fee for the brush and the wood is because we looked at all other towns surrounding us. Long Island's been charging for brush hogs since 2008. We're the only island in the vicinity that we can find, based on the research we did, that isn't charging for this.
But doing that's gonna make us buy an expensive gate and fence system, and that's not cheap, and it's not gonna last. The fence that we have down there now is in shambles. Yeah.
So Bob, part of the rationale, I was on this meeting until the very end when I got sick, but we looked at all of this and the fee schedule and everything else is, we don't want to have to get, everyone has household trash, but not everyone has brush. And I don't want to pay for your brush, and I don't want you to pay for my brush. Or I don't want you to pay for my refrigerator, and I don't want to pay for your refrigerator. So we looked at it to say, so it wasn't, trying to get at people, for bringing their leaves and their brush, and actually leaves were free anyway or something, but. But the whole idea is, we have so many people who everybody's paying for, maybe a third of the people to go dump their stuff. And so we started to say, maybe people will be more, if they're responsible for their own stuff, that they will be more responsible. And maybe not even bring as much up there, but really, that was kind of the rationale. We looked at everything the same way. Television, you didn't have to pay for my television.
Yeah, I agree with all that. That makes sense.
And that's
I do
where,
think
just so you understood where we were coming from.
Yeah, one consequence of charging for the brush is that people are gonna leave it in their yard and that's gonna create fires.
There are some islands that charge for you to get rid of your brush. And they charge you $10 to get rid of the brush, they turn around and burn it. So they're using the $10 to pay for the guy that's staying there to burn the brush. There you go.
The only other comment I would make, Wiscasset just installed one, there's several in the state of Maine and Vermont. There are municipal and school organizations that are providing their heat and in some cases electricity with wood chip boilers. They've been around for a long time. We got a lot of wood chips. We're probably not going to run out of wood chips anytime soon.
And these are all discussions we had, and we recognize that the whole transfer station as a whole really needs a look over. We're constantly filling up the dumpsters and this and that. And so, but this was kind of a step forward on how can we help resolve the issue, because the public works guys, they're overwhelmed with the pile of mulch that's there. They don't know where to put it. Chuck today came in and he's worried that the place is gonna set on fire because some of the piles are so warm. And so if we don't do anything right now, next year, that pile is just gonna get even bigger. And so this could really, the selectmen, you could choose to just put a gate up and say, these are the fees, let's just charge these fees and let the commercial guys freak out. But this is kind of that happy medium of getting the solid waste ordinance figured out so it's flexible, but
This
then
system does
moving
not
forward.
reduce the number of wood chips. That's a separate issue. The system is not, unless people just leave stuff in their yard, it's not going to reduce the number of wood chips. That's still going to be an issue.
And like I said, this is a step forward of, we start having a bigger conversation of what do we do with the transfer station? How do we expand it? Where do we put it? Topic for another
Okay,
day.
and then Mark.
So the other talk was too, if we get some money towards the wood chipping, it might give us a little bit of freedom to either try to, get an 18-wheeler here, pay a company $4,000 or $5,000, whatever, to pay for his barge and man time, come get the chips, get them off our island. To get us to a manageable area. Right now, that place is so overrun, we need to start doing something. Because, like
Open
you
up
said,
that
I
gate
think
a couple
catches,
years
I think
ago.
catches on fire. The contractors were commenting about, well, maybe we should clear some land, and spread the wood chips. And I said, you know, I'm not gonna tell you exactly, but if you spread that about 12 inches, and you'll need about 5 acres probably, just to spread the wood chips that are there, and that's a rough estimate. Because by the shoulders, that pile is, I'm guessing, about 30 feet deep. That's deep.
Well, I'm gonna be very quick because we're getting bogged down.
Yeah.
First of all, as you know, I do appreciate the work you've done on this so far. I don't agree with all of it. Some of the fees are separate from what I understand. We can revisit the fees separate of the ordinance. I share some of Bob's concerns about keeping it simple for now, so I would suggest on page 4, picking number 6 out of there. I don't think you should have the fee section in there in this ordinance. I think it should be taken out of there so that we can revisit it at some other time when we decide what we're doing or not with fees for commercial or
Specific
individual.
what you're talking about on page 4.
On the policy.
Item number 6.
Policy.
Item number 6, page 4.
I would leave the may have individual contracts with.
Right.
I would take the whole thing out, because then it basically,
Just take the.
There's flexibility.
I'm sorry, just take the amounts out.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I think that's the concern.
Okay, my next comment is, are you suggesting that people that don't have an agreement with the town would be then waiting for the transfer station as and driving through the transfer station?
Correct.
See, that, I think, is just going backwards as far as making that facility work smoother.
Well, and that's where we were trying to figure out a way to accommodate the people that use it the most.
I know, I understand what you're trying to do, but that place, the people are lining up. There's contractors that have demolition debris, there's people with cardboard, and they're lining up, waiting for that place to open, and then they go and park in all these different places. And then, sometimes there's an employee vehicle park in the middle. And then you're gonna have all those people going through there again. That didn't work well in the past, I'm just pointing.
Yeah,
that
there
out.
needs to
So,
be a major traffic study. One of the things
Yeah.
that Ann Baxter thought of is moving,
Just my opinion.
Gail's shed over when you first go into the.
Well, and this is where, these are all
So
discussions
we
that
need to
could take
really
place.
move on, though,
for-
because we're never gonna get out of here tonight.
Well, you guys took your time. I got 2 more questions.
Oh.
On that same page up top, right under Sunday, 9 to 4, 9 to 5, no individuals, town employees, contractors, or any others may bring waste to the facility or remove items other than during operating hours. In your opinion, Vika, is everybody clear on that works for this town?
As far as I know, yeah.
Okay, and you will enforce that?
I have not gotten any complaints,
Because
so
I've
if you
seen some
know something
activity,
I don't.
I've seen some activity in the recent past, and I think you handled it. That's all I'm saying. Okay? Pointing that out. On the last page, in bulky waste 9.8, in red, all commercial waste requires a fee. My question is, I was at the transfer station today and someone from a business said to the transfer station attendant, all that I brought was cardboard, so no charge. Is that accurate? That
Cardboard is free.
cardboard is free for all businesses?
Because I thought we,
So,
yeah, because the way we wrote it was,
I'm sorry, that's my question.
yeah, and on the,
It
fees,
seems
on
unreasonable
the
to me.
fees, it said anything that's recyclable that our residents,
Yes.
our provider will take would be free for commercial.
and the purpose,
Really?
For
Okay, I'm
recyclable.
just clarifying it.
The reason for it is to encourage recycling.
Okay, thank you.
so
That's all I have.
commercial, in here, commercial use definition is for the purpose of this ordinance, commercial use of the facility occurs whenever waste items brought to the facility are generated as a result of commercial activity, including but not limited to food preparation, building contractor, service provider, fisherman, retail establishment, arborist, yards, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, that was, one of the ones, the recycling ones, was no fee across the board.
If the provider.
Unless our providers
If
are.
we go in,
You
then I'm-
answered my question. Hold
Okay. What, you got something else?
on. No.
All right. Do we have to make any, take any action? Are we moving this forward to town meeting? I mean, is it by consensus? Is everybody ready for this to go to town meeting?
I'm not thrilled with it.
Okay, well then let's have a motion. Is anybody
Just
want?
speaking my mind.
No, I don't.
You can make a motion excluding those,
Yeah,
fees
Okay, who would like to make a motion?
And I just have just like minor changes that I've, Vika was explaining today about how it was a real pain in the neck to have Kathy redo it all because it wasn't in a Word document.
Right.
And that's why you see a whole bunch of like little words stuck together and all of that. And I went throughout, and also the Board of Selectmen is in there, which it should be select board to be politically correct. So I made those changes and I'll give them to her.
Okay.
but that's non.
This will go to
no
town
specific
meeting
words.
as a clean document, right?
Yes. And so the other thing about this particular document is this will be, because of so many major changes, this is going to be adopted as a replacement to the existing one. And that wording is, Natalie helped me to make sure that that wording was accurate.
It's
Okay,
not
so,
amended, it's.
Yeah.
so could we have a motion to move this to town meeting with the changes that have been suggested about the, taking of these fees, the references fees, and, that Jen will work with Vika on the wordsmithing? Somebody want to make that motion?
So move.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, now discussion. Right.
And this doesn't mean we're gonna go forward with an automated gate, right?
No.
No,
Okay.
no.
I didn't want to ask a stupid question, but I just want to be clear.
So I have
No stupid question?
I have not advertised the fees because I wasn't sure what you guys were gonna do here. So because these fees, you adopted it effective July 1st, we're gonna start to have the advertised, which I'd rather not, because that's just gonna bring people in the next couple of weeks to dump what they can. But we are gonna advertise that this is gonna go into effect.
And I think we just have to keep reinforcing, this is a pay-as-you-go facility that we all generate our own trash, and we should all pay for our own trash.
So I think we need, after we do this, I'd like to propose about, taking out the $10 for the brush and the $100 for the.
Well, that's a whole different discussion, because that's on the fee, so you can do that at the next meeting.
That would need to be an agenda item.
Town meeting.
No, I mean, the meeting after the town meeting, that's before July 1st.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because I think that should be advertised before the change.
Can I argue about it then?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is she still gonna be able to or put the fees out there? Or we're gonna have to wait until we figure out that portion of it, to put the whole fee schedule?
Can you just adopt it as it
Can you
is,
adopt
and
it,
then we
and then
start
later on change
collecting
it?
fees July 1st, and then figure out the commercial guys and everything else? I mean,
Yeah.
we'll probably get some illegal dumping for the time being until we put a gate, but
I think just go forward with it, and you can change it in August if you want to change it. Or you can change it in July if you want to change it, but we need to move forward.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question? What does the ordinance have to do with the fees?
It doesn't, except they want to talk about it, I'm trying to stop it, so it doesn't get out of here.
I think it needs to be put on the next agenda.
Yeah.
What do you want to call that for the next agenda?
The fee schedule for the, to discuss
Solid waste
and possible action for the solid waste, fee schedule.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table. Or did we get a second?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, then moved and seconded.
This motion is that Jen
To
is
move-
gonna work with Vika on
on the wordsmithing, and we're gonna take out the 1,000 and 5,000, and we're heading it to town meeting. All in favor? Unanimous. Okay, thank you for that work. I know you guys, you don't know how many reads they had. They really did, they worked out on that.
We don't want to.
Okay, good. All right, so we'll review and approve the town warrant. My only suggestion, and I'm happy if you shoot me down, would be to take the items 50, 51, and 52 and put them after the solid waste, just because at the beginning of the meeting, there's always more people, and at the end, it's like half the people have gone home. And that has to do with broadband and the affordable housing later. And it just seems like those are important things to have up front when you've got the most people here.
What are you proposing, Don?
I'm proposing moving 50, 51, and 52 and make them the Article 6, 7, and 8.
I don't see, no, I don't see any issues with the way it is.
Okay.
People are gonna, most people stay till the end anyway.
I would have to get clarification from Natalie about wording. And as far as like other municipal articles, would you do the same, so.
People are gonna hang around for the broadband.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
All right, like I said,
That's probably the only reason people.
when we first became a town, we had all the substantive issues in the beginning.
we got the capital budget, that's most of that too.
I will say I had Marjorie and the lawyer look at this.
I didn't see anything else.
I've gone through it, and it looks good to me, but I'm not right. So.
Mike, man,
Yes,
I have one question about Article 17, written ballot required. So the town raising the appropriate the sum of
It's
$531,000.
a school one, it's legally obligated to have a written ballot.
Okay, that's the one. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
on page 8, there's it's actually a content error. When it says, Article 34, to see whether the town will authorize the additional donation of municipal employee time, blah, blah, blah. And it says these properties are not owned by the town. The town does own the rec center land.
Yeah,
We lease it
I
to,
noticed that too.
we
The
lease
land-
it to the rec center.
The land is owned by the.
We
town.
still own the town. I mean, own the town. We still own the land. I'm getting tired.
So you want me to just remove the
No,
explanation?
I'm just saying that I was just, it's not accurate. So I don't know if it makes a difference. You could just say,
I think that's been like that for a few years anyway.
Yeah, I did not touch that article.
okay.
That's been. I
Well, in
think we-
case somebody asks,
Yeah.
I'm the only person who even knows that, so.
And Vic,
Well, like that.
we're just mentioning the Chandler's Cove water maintenance because it's state owned. Is that why that's mentioned?
Because we stopped doing any of those.
Yeah, so a lot of this
And I
was a
just feel-
discussion from a couple of years ago when the town crew plowed the library and the wharf and the rec center, and so that's why this was put in.
And
This
I
was
think the only
authorized.
reason we kept those two is one is the rec center was owned by the town and the board is owned by the state. And that's why.
This was, or that was enacted after the town put the back of the library
Yeah.
steps. So
And that's when we stopped doing
that's
the
how that came
commons
about.
too, right?
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yes, and the commons, we do an annual donation instead.
And the library, I think we added to
I have
their.
one question about Article 42, to see what the sum the town will vote to raise and appropriate for the payment of the town covering for 50% of the outer island tax, 8,800.
Yeah.
We'll recommend it's an estimate, yeah, so is.
Oh, so what we
Would that
have
be
to
a
do
concrete
is
number?
we have to print out, it's based on the tax assessment. And so it's always an estimate, but it stays relatively close because we don't actually know the actual number until the taxes are committed and then it's a.
I just don't remember seeing estimate on the past warrants.
I didn't change it.
Okay.
All right, anybody else have anything else?
Yeah, I do, unfortunately.
What page, Jay?
It's item 3. This is the secret ballot question. I talked to Vika about this earlier. Someone in the community came to me and pointed out that the hearing or the notice for the public meeting is required to be 7 days. This was done in 5 days. Now, which leads to wonder whether you can actually include Article 3 in this. I assume that everybody wants to just let it ride, but ultimately, what it could mean, and I know Vika mentioned that she had talked to the attorney about this a little bit after we talked, but it could open or jeopardize the potential outcome of the vote. Because if it was improperly noticed for the public hearing, people can come back and say, regardless how the vote comes out, whichever way it goes, somebody can come back and say, you know, well, there wasn't proper notification, the public hearing, people didn't know about it, even though we had 40 people or 30 people, whatever it is.
Right.
So I bring this up as something that we need to be aware of. And, you know, that there may be some consequences.
Well, the alternative is to have a special election sometime. What is it, next 60, 30?
There'd have to be a special election very
It has-
quickly.
So it has to be noticed within 60 days of when the petition was submitted to us, which was May 2nd. So we would have to hold a special election and run at 8 to 8. I did talk to Natalie today. The purpose of the public hearing like we had today was intended to take place instead of a town meeting. Because this was requested to be done in secret ballot, I looked into it, and it is a mistake on my part. I looked at the referendum, you know, and I had Marjorie help me, and we did all the due diligence that we thought we were doing. And this came into fruition when I double checked with Natalie to see, you know, should we have a warrant article on the warrant, allowing people to speak, and that's when this progressed and ended up being on this meeting. And it is technically 2 days shy of the posting. She said basically that if you're going to challenge on the basis of the procedure, that the statute that states that doesn't say what happens. And so if somebody, you know, after we hold this election, if somebody wants to come back and fight the town, it would be very little to grounds to stand on, and then the town would most likely win it. If the people, you know, if somebody here today spoke up and said that it wasn't properly advertised, they were here, they had their opinion to speak and talk. So it is, and I will take the blame for it. You know, I tried doing the best that we could. We were unexpectedly 2 days short of the posting. Ultimately, what this would turn into is from the office staff, we're going to proceed and take our chances and have this, because if we don't, in another month, we're going to have a special election where we're going to have to work a 15-hour shift, where we're going to have to do this all over again. And that's just town's expense, time, and money. And so it was a great turnout. I hope people continue to talk about it, and I hope people can spread the word and convince people to vote how they feel is right. But at this point, I just don't. After talking to now,
I'd like to correct one thing you said. You keep saying, taking responsibility for it. You got bad advice from the attorney. The attorney should have looked at this and said, here's the process, here are the times, frames.
The town attorney did write, she did send it. I think you went to MMA, right?
I talked about the procedure of this with our town attorney, and where, I asked her specifically about how, when the public hearing needs to be held prior to the meeting, which was 14 days. And then, you know, the discussion was missed about the 10 days that it needed to be posting. What she said is, you know, if you're gonna do this, do it as soon as you can. And when I posted it, it
I'm
was.
just saying, you
2
shouldn't
days
take it
later,
on
so.
your shoulders.
Well,
shouldn't
yeah,
have
but
to
it's
worry about
still, you know, regardless, you know, it's gonna have to be voted on one way or another, so.
So my question is, so what Natalie's saying is that the risk of having something overturned on that technicality is slim.
Slim to none.
But what would it take? Only one person to challenge it?
I think it would take one person to challenge, but they would have to have very legitimate, proof that, it wasn't posted in time, but then it would also go to town attorney, and then the town attorney would argue their case, and so it's, I mean, it would, they could challenge it, and that's fine, it's just gonna cost town money doing it, so is it really worth it? Because of the 2-day difference, I personally don't think so, because otherwise it's gonna cost us a lot more as a town to do a whole special election, because we're gonna have to do it in July shortly after, you know, just shy a couple of weeks after this.
So theoretically, it would probably have to not be somebody who is here tonight. It would be
Yes.
somebody who was not here tonight,
Yes,
who could say that they had no idea about the public hearing
yes,
because it wasn't properly noticed.
Yes.
Is that basically what we're saying?
yes.
Let's move on.
Yeah, so well, we're gonna decide, are we, do we have a motion to move this, to town meeting?
Well, we have the whole warrant. Are you done? I was wondering if Jay was still.
Yeah, I'm
I thought, I was under the impression he had a whole bunch.
No, no.
Okay, so do we want to vote on whether we take that particular, do we go forward with this or we postpone it for 30 days or whatever? Or do we just say that we want to have a motion
So
to
you,
accept this
you
as
as
it's
Board of
written?
Selectmen can't really make a decision, I mean, you can ultimately, but it, I mean, it's really, I guess you could do what you want.
Well,
I move that we, accept the Town of Chebeague Island annual town meeting warrant as written.
all right, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any more discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Nobody?
Jay, what was that?
All in favor?
Somewhere in between.
That's what it felt like.
He's opposed to how long it took us to come to a
It was an
Oh,
Jay,
I agree.
approved? Yeah, I mean, it's a risk, but I just can't see
Yeah,
people with
that's
it, you know.
can you sign it, because our deadline to post it is tomorrow.
Let me bring up communications while he signs.
I approve the minutes from May 18th. Move, we approve the minutes from May 18th.
second.
Ask that, we get, the minutes stuck in our packet.
Packet? Yeah.
You mind?
No, what?
Thank
And
you.
then put in the packet. Oh, hard copy of the minutes?
Yes, please.
No.
For May 18th. Okay, so is it been moved and seconded?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor? Great, thank you. All right, items to be placed on future agenda. There's, I think, several things that Chris has
Checks
already.
the work systems, fee schedule for solid waste. Things like that.
Yeah. Everybody can get information to her. And Chris, whatever you might want before the next meeting. Okay, so now could we have a motion for executive session, to go into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056A personnel and take any resulting action.
So,
Second.
So while Chris is cleaning up here, anybody need to go to the bathroom or anything, you can do it.